In this video, we will be reviewing the Quantum Wizard MT5 Expert Advisor by Mr. Bogdan Ion Puskazu. Stick around to the end to receive a free expert advisor from us at Prosperity Algo Solutions. So, Mr. Bogdan here is the creator of all of the quantum expert advisors. He has the Quantum Emperor being his most famous, but also there's the Quantum Queen, which trades gold. I think there's Quantum Starman as well. So this gentleman loves all things quantum. And this one in particular trades the S&P 500. So some forex brokers call that US 500, whereas others would call that the SPX 500. But effectively, it's the major US equity index. And here we're seeing that it trades both the London and the New York stock market times. And it also supposedly trades 6 different strategies. And if we try and get an idea of how the actual bot works, he says it uses a sophisticated grid system and advanced money management that's designed for peak performance. And the majority of this gentleman's bots tend to be grid martingales. So based on that and based on this line saying grid and advanced money management, I wouldn't be surprised if that is a grid martingale, or it's a fancy way of saying grid martingale. And here we can see that it requires high leverage, also fairly indicative that it's using a grid martingale. And supposedly it has a few different interesting filters. We can take a quick look here. We're seeing very good results. These back tests are likely somewhat over-optimized, like turning, what is that? $10,000 into 4.2 million is not typically possible. However, most people on MT5 tend to do these type of very impressive looking back tests, so you can't really blame them for that. It's kind of part of the game. But really, we don't have a live signal here, nor do we have a ton of information of how this works. But so far, from what I can see, it appears to be a grid martingale on the S&P 500. And let me quickly open up the MT5 backtester, where I've taken the liberty of downloading this. Okay, so we can now kick off here on the Inputs tab to get a bit of a better idea of how this bot works. I've also already ran a backtest here, so the graph you see in front of you is the how the system ran, and this is the Quantum Wizard. And now we can quickly scroll through here, and we can see that there are a few different methods of position sizing based on risk levels, as well as based on, I believe you can use a fixed system too. And they do have a few methods of also managing drawdown. So that's actually a good sign. Like with these grid martingale systems, a particularly viable strategy is you can trade with high risk where you're looking to double the account. However, you can also apply an equity drawdown limit, so that if it goes below a certain amount, you simply you stop trading. And it's a way of kind of using this with an alternative type of stop loss. And there's all these different methods of effectively trying to use this technique to make returns. But just with a caveat, it is a high-risk technique, even if you're using an equity stop loss, or if you're trying to do the account doubling approach, there is inherent risk with this type of system. So it's just good to be mindful of that. And here we can see as well, kind of scrolling through, that there are some fairly advanced filters in terms of day of week or Christmas and holiday-based filters. And apart from that, we're really not seeing a ton. We can go through the back test here, and this does appear to be a classic grid martingale system. I ran this on medium risk settings, and even with that, it seems to have taken like a very, very limited amount of risk. This is not necessarily a great sign, because with grid martingales, if you make the lot size significantly, incredibly small, so you make the starting lot incredibly small, it gives you a lot of leeway to have these big grids where you can open up many, many, many different levels before closing. So what a seller might do is they might set the initial lot size to being something really small, just to make sure that all of these dips are really, really small. Like let's say, for instance, the seller had 10x the lot size, his initial lot size, in order to get a higher return here. These dips may have been enormous and blown the account. So you have to be a bit mindful of that. Like if under the medium risk settings, we're seeing such a small amount of returns, there is the potential that the seller has effectively purposely made the initial lot size incredibly small to avoid blowing the account. So I would be a little bit cognizant about that. One thing to note as well is I'm always very skeptical of running any sort of grid martingale system on an asset which trends like crazy. So to give you an example, like the S&P 500, like it trends. It's a US equity market, so it always trends over the long term, at least typically always, historically over the past 100 years, it has trended to the upside. So just by the nature of the underlying asset, it's not mean reverting, because the US, as long as the US economy is growing, it should generally speaking go up. So if you're trying to run a grid martingale system, which is based on the concept of mean reversion, with an asset which just by its nature trends upwards, that's probably not a great idea. Also, like with US equity markets, you can have these enormous pushes upwards. So you have to be very cognizant of that. And that's why grid martingales often pair really well with more like mean reverting based pairs, such as like the Aussie New Zealand dollar, the Aussie CAD, which tend to oscillate back and forth, usually significantly enough that you can close your grid. Whereas like trading a grid martingale on gold or on the S&P can be rather risky. But I digress. Let's run a visual backtest here to get a bit of a better idea of how this bad boy works. And okay, let me just pause it here. So yes, this is very clearly a grid martingale system. So it's opening a ton of system trades. But one thing which is interesting is that it's not really sizing the lots that much so far. But let me take a look at that. This is quite fascinating, actually. Interesting. Okay, so let me pause that and maybe add one caveat to it. It's not a traditional grid martingale, and because we can look at the volume here and we can see that it's not necessarily scaling up the lot size massively. Perhaps that's because this is on a medium, or it's not scaling the lot size at all. So perhaps that's because we are on medium risk settings. However, I would venture that if trades start to go against it, it just keeps opening more and more positions. So it is still increasing like the amount of like floating positions, like the total position size opened is increasing. So you could still perhaps call that a martingale, but it's not doing so by necessarily increasing trade size. It's doing so by increasing trade frequency, which is possibly a safer approach. But if you just open 10 times 0.01 lots, that's the same thing as opening like 1 times 0.1 lots. So there is still a degree of lot scaling here. It's just being done in a method which might be a little bit safer. So maybe to wrap up this video, this is definitely a grid system. It's, I would say, a modified martingale. And this is from a developer who has a lot of experience in developing these types of systems. So I wouldn't be surprised if this thing does what it says it does. And really it comes down to your personal risk preferences. I'm not a huge fan of grid martingales on these type of trending assets, but in a particular risk cap setting, like perhaps certain types of prop firms, or if you're looking to do an account flip, there could be some value behind this. So yeah, it appears to be a relatively honest system. You know you're getting what it is you're expecting, but just know what you're getting yourselves into. Awesome. And yeah, take care guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. Before you click away, if you're looking to get a real expert advisor, here at Prosperity Algo Solutions, we're currently offering our Golden Time Bomb system based on automating the London breakout and opening range breakout 100% for free. Watch the pinned video to find out more and to get access.